evening. Hi, my name's Debbie Burke, and I'm the director of the Malden Redevelopment Authority, and chairing this effort to help revamp and rewrite the city's open space and recreation plan. And I want to welcome everybody here. I know, especially when we start getting into spring, everybody's lives get very busy. So I think so far we've really had a great community effort. 491 people took the online survey, which is, I don't know, 400 times of the amount of people that were engaged the last time we did this study. So it's really good, So I do want to acknowledge a couple of people in the audience. We have two city councilors here. Councilor Barbara Murphy, who is standing in the back of the room, she also is a member of the Open Space Planning Committee. There's about 13 or 14 of us on that committee. And Councilor Ryan O'Malley from Ward 4. Additionally, our committee has received a lot of help from Maria Louise from the mayor's office. The mayor put together a committee that includes, city residents and volunteers. This is Alex from Senator Lewis's office. My apologies, Alex has attended this forum and the other forum, so thank you.
He's a Malden resident.
So how we're going to structure tonight's forum, it's the second public forum that we've had, and in order to help the committee write an open space plan. Our timeline is to get the open space plan submitted sometime in early June to a department of the state that's called the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. The reason the document has to be in there is should the city decide to file for a grant. Certain grants require that you have an open space plan done. So we have to have an open space plan in final draft form submitted to them in early June in order to make, if we do, it will be up to the city, decide to submit an application for a park grant, which is due in mid-June to the Commonwealth. So the committee, which we will acknowledge in one of the slides here, because all their names are listed in one of the slides. Again, they've been, meeting just about every week on looking at the current plan and trying to redraft that. So, if folks want to stand or raise their hand when they're acknowledged, but these are the folks that we have joined us on a weekly basis. Andrea Antonucci, who represents Malden Youth Soccer. She was down there. Brian Creamer from the Walkability Committee. He's in the back. Brian Zalacy, an active Malden resident, who's in the back. Jason Hamelin, another active Maldonian. Bobby Knox, the director of the DPW. Joe Levine, who is our Malden Recreation Department coordinator. We had acknowledged Barbara Murphy. Michelle Romero, the city planner. Bob Rotundi is a local resident and known for being Mr. Babe Ruth. Marie Shea, who represents the Challenger League, she's in the back. Prisco Tamaro, who was the mayor's designee. Steve Winslow from Bike to the Sea. I also want to take a moment to welcome another city councilor here, Councilor John Matheson. So at this point, what I'm going to do is turn this over to Cynthia Wall, who is working with an entity called the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which was hired by the city in order to work with this committee to draft the open space and recreation plan. She will walk through the program tonight. She has a very brief PowerPoint presentation that will explain the process probably better than I've tried to. And then we're going to break down into, one group exercise, which is that longer 11 by 17 sheet of paper. But she'll explain that. Our preference is to try to keep everybody in one room, although we do have at least another adjoining room here to do the group exercise. If there's a way of trying to turn chairs around and do it within this room, because the last forum that we had at the the school turned out to be, there was more collaboration and communication happening around the individual tables, and people just seem to feed and play off of each other's comments. And we'd like to do that here so we don't break up the group, but we'll see how it goes if it starts getting too congested in here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Cynthia Wall.
Thank you, Deb. Can you hear me? Good. I'm Cynthia Wall. I am a principal planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, known as MAPC. MAPC is one of 13 regional planning agencies in the state. We work with 101 cities and towns in the greater Boston area, and we provide land use, transportation, environmental, zoning, health, and collective procurement services with the communities. So tonight we're just going to talk about the open space plan, primarily the goals and action steps that comprise really the most important part of the plan. We're also going to talk about the survey and why that was important, and the last forum and why that was important. And then we're going to ask you to weigh in on the goals and action steps. The plan is good for 7 years, so that's why there's a time frame there. So what is an open space plan, and what is open space? What are we talking about? Well, an open space plan, the actual chapters are dictated by the state. The statewide, any community that applies for certain funds, just as Deb said, has to complete an action plan, an open space plan. So we have some discretion to include some, maybe a chapter on climate change or something like that, but pretty much it's prescribed what we have to do. We have to talk about the history, we have to do a Americans with Disability assessment of the open spaces and make sure, let's see how that is shaping up. Are they accessible to everybody? What do we mean by open space? Well, open space, again, they have a rather lengthy definition for their report, but really we're talking about spaces or areas that are not used for buildings, unbuilt areas. They're not developed, they're areas that are not developed, and this definition of space includes air, water, and land. So it's, you know, when we talk open space, it's almost anything you can think about. In terms of the state's definition, they talk about even trees and things that are part of the natural environment. This is the draft plan map. We have to prepare a series of maps, and you see on this map we have included the Bike to the Sea Trail and the Riverwalk. I'm not sure you can see this, but we have a copy up on the wall there. Since the last plan, Malden has done a couple of these plans. The last plan covered the period 2009 to 2015, and over $20 million was spent to improve parks and open spaces. These are just a few selected projects. We have a whole list.
I just have to make, I just noticed in the slide, there's one correction. The capital investment at Howard Park was $7.6 million. That number is incorrect.
All right, we'll fix that. Before the report is issued, thank you. Sorry, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So you can see, this is only a selection of what has been accomplished. That's a huge, huge investment in your parks and open space. We did a survey, and the survey is very important, and it's a step that is recommended, because what you're trying to do in the open space plan is figure out what your needs are. What do you need for your open space, and what do you want? And then you figure out your goals and your action steps to actually address those needs. So one of the best ways to do this is a survey. We had 491 responses. The survey was also translated into Mandarin and Portuguese, I believe, and Spanish. So we really tried to get a broad, and Haitian Creole, a broad sampling of the citizenry here. So it's interesting. These are the responses, the next few slides, to the survey questions. It's pretty representative across the board. Again, I'm sorry you can't see it. So, pretty representative across the wards, right? 12, 13%, 9%, 20% Ward 3, 4%, 6% Ward 4, 6.5%, and Ward 7. So 7 and 4, not so much. The shape of the pie chart, I mean, the wedges are proportionate to the answers. So, of course, 20% is the largest. The next series of slides we put together like this from the survey data. Anyone have any questions on understanding the charts? Good. Okay. So the question was, what about facilities for children? There were 3 questions. How about enough facilities? How is the quality? And what about the maintenance? So you see about half of the respondents didn't think that things were there were enough, that the quality was quite there, and the maintenance was quite there. But the other half were either pleased, fully a quarter were always pleased, and then another quarter were not sure. What about facilities for adults? Tracks very similarly, you can see. Not sure is the orange, and then yes, and then no, about half, a little more than half for adults. This was interesting. Most used parks and recreation areas. So 63% Pine Bank, 41% of the people who responded used the bike to the sea. 51% use, help me pronounce that? Amherst Park, I thought so. 41% Fellsmere, should be an S, and then Deborah, in Bruce Field. So this is, and then, we have more responses, but we just highlighted the top ones. This is what people said they wanted. And pay close attention to this, because this is one of the ways that we develop the goals, or you develop the goals for the plan and the action steps. 38% want bike trails or separated bike lanes. 37% want a walkway along the Malden River. 35% desire park amenities such as seating and lighting. Benches came up a lot. That was actually the top topic for several questions. Benches, that's people wanted benches. 36% want entertainment, plaza for the arts, social activities. So that goes to programming, an opportunity to put some programs in different park areas. 34% more children's play areas, and 31% community gardens. Yeah, it's interesting. See, that's why you do the survey. Now, the first question was, would you like athletic facilities? So we separated that into its own slide, because that was actually the most. 44% wanted more athletic fields. And then the next question asked, all right, if you chose that answer, what kind of fields? So soccer, 80%. Look at soccer's 80% and football's 14%. What's happened here? Back in the day, no. Open play, turf, 53%. Baseball, 29%. Softball, 15%. Lacrosse, 14%. And frisbee, that doesn't look like a frisbee to me, but that's what our graphic designer came up with, so. 9. Oh, thank you. All right.
Can you say, what does open play turf mean?
I think that would mean just open fields where people could do pickup games. It's not a, like it wouldn't be striped for any kind of formal spot. It would be a place you could picnic, you could just go, you could have open fields to do things with your friends, maybe toss a frisbee to your dog, that kind of thing.
I had a question right here.
No dogs in parks. Well, but you might be able to have yes.
I had I'm seeing for soccer 80%. I think the problem with soccer is soccer has problem getting fields, because I know baseball is not an issue. I'm not sure what's the difference between how many players are actually for baseball players, or how many, but soccer is always an issue, because my son's been playing for a few years, and we usually get weird spots actually to play soccer. I mean, not even a designated area, and then it's every year our coach struggles to get actually. So maybe that's the reason a lot of people are asking for more soccer, because soccer is not actually. They have a big issue with that.
Thank you. Thank you. We're finding that in other communities as well.
So is that going to be resolved somehow, or?
Why don't we hold questions for the end so that we can get through the presentation? And Mr. Knox is offering to actually answer that, rather than getting maybe off the track, so we can just complete this portion, and then we'll open it for questions. So the question was, should open space be included in the city's spending plan? And this is pretty resounding. 84.6% said yes. The neutral is the 11, and 4% said no. Now, it doesn't specify whether this is your operating budget, a special line item in your operating budget, or whether it's part of your capital plan. Now, obviously, having accomplished $20 million worth of projects, that's capital funding and grants and so forth. But, so this may, the question isn't specific, but I think it's a really good indication that people want to earmark funding for open space. We should acquire, this was the question, I think it was should be, but we should acquire more land for athletic fields. And 60% yes, acquire more land. 26% were neutral, and 14% disagreed or strongly disagreed. There were actually 5 choice categories for all of these questions: strongly agree or agree, neutral, and disagree or strongly disagree. But for the purposes of really just showing you the trend, we simplified it. The full analysis will be in the final plan. Should we acquire more land for playgrounds? 61% yes, 30%. That's interesting. So 31% were neutral, and almost 8% disagreed. And what was interesting to me as I looked at this is the amount of folks that were kind of neutral on a lot of questions. So I would use Malden's open spaces if I knew more about them. Look what, you'd have more friends in the park if 80% of people knew a little bit more. Wonder what could we do to develop a goal or some action steps around the answer to this question. 4% didn't agree, and 16% were neutral. I would like a public outdoor skating rink. About half of the people would like one. 17% didn't agree, and the others were kind of neutral. This one's interesting. A continuous public path along the Malden River. Well, again, 85% would like to see that. 13% are neutral, and only 2% agreed or disagreed. So that seems like a pretty good topic for a goal, doesn't it? Extra taxes.
Thank you.
85% of the people who took the poll want the Riverwalk to be continued. Okay, so now we're going to talk about money. Now, as many times as we review this question, I'm afraid it's in truth of reporting, it's a little skewed because the big category is 0 to 99. So we don't know if 68% don't want to pay anything, or maybe they would be willing to pay $50. So we probably should have said 1 to 99 or 50 to 99. So I'm not sure this is totally accurate. Hope we don't have a statistician here, but I don't think that is. 21% will be willing to pay between $100 and $250, that's a good sum. And then look, 10%, $251 to $500. Fully 10% of people would pay a little bit more. So I think if we do the survey the next time around in 7 years, we will want to word this one a little bit differently. We are. Now, this is called a word cloud. Has anybody, or a thought cloud, has anybody ever heard of this before? So you know what you do. You feed in a lot of words that people have from whatever, from a public forum or from the survey, and then the computer program creates this, and the most used words are the biggest. The only problem is, I realized looking at this, a lot of people wanted trash barrels, but it's hard to get both words to come in as a phrase. So that's why trash is so big, but I think it's really got barrels, and I couldn't find barrels in here. But benches, see, didn't I mention that? Lighting, bike trail, I think those two go together. I think maybe water feature. But this just, it's kind of a fun way to answer the question, what would you like to see along the Bike to the Sea Northern Community Trail? What would you like to see in our open space? So, splash, I think they probably mean the water feature. Again, trash shows up, but it really was in conjunction with barrels. Fields, play area, that one comes through. So some of them came through, some of them didn't. But we have, again, the full results that will be included in the plan. And then, what would you like to see along the Malden River? I thought I'd better point that out. I did catch that a little earlier, and I thought if I don't point that out, they'll think that we're clueless in what we're doing here. Benches, river access, I think, path, water areas, river picnic tables, history, people. It's great. People make wonderful comments. So I don't know if you could see this, but the whole point of the open space plan really boils down to you figure out your needs and your wants, and then you figure out what you really want to tackle in the next 7 years. Because let's face it, there's only so much time, there's only so much energy, there's only so much city staff time that can be devoted to different things. So you want to really hone in on what it is you want to accomplish. So that's the end of the presentation. And now we can have some questions and some comments. And then what we prepared is this little brochure. And we're going to do a little exercise with the brochure. But should I explain that, or should we go to the questions first? Okay. Questions?
How you doing? Ma'am, to answer your question on soccer, Malden Youth Soccer has actually the most permits in the city out of any sport that there is. They use Pine Banks, McDonald Stadium, Amridge, Deborah, and Linden are all permitted to Malden Youth Soccer. So they actually outweigh baseball, softball, all the other sports in the city. So that 80% number that reflects how many people play soccer also coincides with how many permits are given out to Malden Youth Soccer. Thank you.
I want to pass the cordless mic around so everybody can hear. Even though it is a small one.
Yeah, about the soccer, the coaches have a hard time with train the kids because they don't have the place. Like Monday, they will cancel my son train because there's no place, and I don't know why.
Other people question?
I heard, I'm not involved with Malden Youth Soccer, but I heard they had 1,000 more kids this year than last year. So even though they're using a lot of the soccer, I think because we have so little amount of recreation space, they still need more. That's the point.
I think that's what what the survey indicated, right? Back here?
Yeah, I just wanted to, is it maybe because the coach is not requesting early enough then maybe? Because we have the same, I've been doing it for a few years, it's been the same issue that the coach has problem finding a spot and we end up somewhere in the corner, and then there's baseball playing, the ball goes over there, and of course they get upset too. So I don't know, is there a guideline on how the coach should, if coach is the highest for soccer, if they have the most spaces. So I don't know why it's an issue with us every year, so I'm not sure.
We might need administration on all the youth soccer, on how they divvy up the time with the different coaches. I don't know, I can't speak for them, but I can tell you that the park space for soccer is the biggest permanent team sport for youth in the city of Malden.
All right. Here.
Hi, I'm the registrar for Malden Youth Soccer, so I can answer some of these questions. Okay, basically, we have 31 travel teams right now, and probably about 30 in-town teams. The in-town teams are little kids. They have a spot Saturday morning, Sunday morning, so that's pretty much set. There's 31 travel teams, each practice twice a week and have games Saturdays. So at the beginning of the season, we negotiate with the city for permits. I didn't know we had a permit for Deborah. I thought that was basically... But anyway, we have permits for various fields. The trouble is we don't have enough for the 31 teams to each practice twice a week. And so that's the challenge. So it isn't the coach's responsibility, it's the responsibility of soccer to figure out how to fit kids in. We also don't have 1,000 more than last year. We have grown by about 15% a year for the last 5 or 6 years. So we had about probably 900 unique kids this year, some playing all 3 seasons, some playing just fall or spring, and that includes little kids. But it is an awful lot of kids.
Anybody else? Any other comments?
I'm just curious about the Howard Park. Every time I go by there, it's locked. And I was wondering if there is public access, because a lot of kids were using that park playing before. So I wonder if you have the answer.
We need to get to goals and action steps, and I want to really focus on the presentation rather than make this into a general open space forum and question and answer session. But if we have time at the end, we'll definitely address this, the question. And I don't mean to be rude or cut you off, but we could go on all evening, and we really do want to get to goals. What I would do if I was in the audience and I had a question about soccer, or I had a question about, I would make sure that that became an action step in my discussion when we go over this plan.
I found out how much money they spent, and every time you buy that field, it's locked. So you get $7 million of beautiful.
Okay, then I am going to turn the microphone over because I've been asked to. Okay.
No, I can definitely answer any questions after this. This is a different kind of session, but speaking to Howard Park, that is locked at night. All our parks, we have an ordinance that requires us to close at sundown. And what time do they open, Bobby?
Park hours are 8 a.m. to sunset unless otherwise permitted. So if you have a permit for a night baseball game where there's lights, that's fine. But parks are open 8 a.m. to sunset.
Yep.
No, that's
You can go by there at noontime almost any day that's locked.
What's happening though is some of the schools are using them, and some of the athletic directors lock it on their way out, and it doesn't get reopened unless it's brought to our attention, and then we have the DPW go out and open it. But it should be opened every morning, and it's sundown.
Yeah, I can tell you I live down in Linden, and part of my regular routine is going through around checking Maplewood Park and Howard Park on my morning drive around. It's always open before 8 a.m. and it closes at sunset. So, I mean, there was a time in the winter time where, in my opinion, after hours in the dark at Howard Park, there's nothing good that's going to be going on, and it was locked. But 8 a.m. to sunset, the park is open every single day.
Well, now, are we all set? Ready to move on? Can we do? Yeah. Is that? Yeah. We need to move on to this Malden River. Again, I think it's time to go to our little group sessions, right?
I thought there was supposed to be a forum that we could speak. No?
Thank you. The Malden River, as you've pointed out, seems to be have a high spot in the survey. I'm with the Friends of the Malden River. I would say just very nice for people to want the park, but to get from here to have a walking park along the river is going to be very difficult. The Friends just had a very experience with a developer at the corner of Method and Canal Streets. We tried to get some amenities for the public, and the developer basically shot us down and offered us a bike rack. I mean, we were asking for 2 parking spaces, 1 handicap. We're asking for trash receptacles. We're asking for lighting. We're asking for a path that was wider than that's actually prescribed by the DEP. But it was a very not very helpful experience, except to say, with all the different properties and all the different owners along the river, we're not going to see a path like Method has, and we're not going to see a path like Everett's going to have. And it's going to be some public government involvement that's going to make that happen. It's not going to be by people wanting it. I'm sorry? Yes, as I said, there has to be some governmental intervention here with either a zoning change or overlay or something like that. It's not going to be because we want it.
Are there any other questions? Anyone else? Okay, Briscoe?
Cynthia, what are the results of the survey going to be made public?
You know, they're public now. I have a copy of, I'm not sure I have it all with me.
We put it on the web in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we'll put it with all the comments. The comments are unedited, you know, so they just probably put them up just the way they were submitted. Okay.
I had a question. I might have missed it. How many people did partake the?
491. 490. All right. So the gentleman's question about, or his comments about the river park is a perfect segue. What we did using the results of the survey and information from the committee and the city, we've developed 4 very general goals, and they're at the top of the sheet. Maintain and manage Malden's parks. These are in no specific order, you know, they could be 1, they could be 4. Construct additional, and this refers to the fields question. Improve Bike to the Sea Northern Strand Community Trail. And then the Malden Riverwalk. Continue to develop this new open space. These are the topics that seem to really rise to the top. And then we looked at the survey answers and what people suggested under these different topics. As I mentioned, benches were very popular, but for the Bike to the Sea also, programs, public art, write a plan to manage the trail. The Riverwalk, very interesting. Someone suggested rezone. This is 1, 2, 3, the 4th item down, rezone to require setbacks from the river. So these are very specific steps that the city and other groups can look at to determine how to spend their time, how to spend their money. And what we would like you tonight to do is to get into little groups, because as Deb said, the last time there was a wonderful energy when people were discussing amongst themselves rather than, you know, I could say to you, okay, everybody check this off, pass this out, pass this back on the way in. But I don't think that's going to be as productive as if you come up with other steps yourself and look at these. These are by no means the exhaustive list. And some you may not agree with, some you may not think are good ideas at all. So you could talk about these goals. Are these the goals that resonate with you for the next 7 years? Are these the good action steps? And then if you possibly can, think about exactly how these action steps might work. Rezoning is pretty clear. We'll all go to Michelle's office and we'll talk to her about writing a zoning ordinance, right? No, I can do that. I know how to do that. I'll take you with me. We'll go do that, talk with her. But what about benches? Are there innovative ways to actually get some benches? What do you do? Ask the city to do a big general procurement of 100 benches? Or do you think about, gee, maybe we could put a memorial bench program in place? Some places do that. And, we could put some benches along the bike path in memory of or in honor of our loved ones. So, innovative ideas like that are very, very welcome. So after we said we'd leave at 8, so about half an hour, you'll have to go through this. We'll do a very quick report out like we did at the first forum if you were here. We call on people, you just mentioned one thing, either one action item or one great idea or something you want to share. Don't go through the whole list, and then we move around the room so that we really get to hear from a lot of people. How does that?
Can I ask one more question about the
No,
slide?
Counselor, no. I'm sorry. We're close. I'm kidding.
I need to go back to a former slide, so I apologize. So I had a question about all of this gray area here. So I saw that this is city-owned land, and I know that there's a good number of city-owned property, specifically on the northern portion of the city, which borders Melrose, which is a little bit more wooded. And we're talking about open space. There's also some publicly owned land down here in Linden along the Pine River. And I was wondering if we took into account acquiring or designating publicly owned land as open space and protecting it. Because I noticed that there is permanently protected land, and then there's city-owned land. And I was just wondering if that was something that we inquired during the study.
Yes, this is still a draft map, and we are in the process. That's something that members of the committee are very interested in, is actually making sure we have a full inventory of what is publicly owned, what is protected permanently, and we're going to be working on that very topic. Yes, anything. We left room on the bottom of this for other. So that's for other comments.
Yeah, so if you wanted to do that,
Yes, or if it doesn't fit and you need more room, you can write it on the back of your agenda. We have the agenda, and just, you can pass it in. If it doesn't fit and there's not enough room, just do another sheet.
Thank you.
So my question is, how I presume the plan will incorporate these recommendations, but what other additional expertise will go into the plan? For example, there's nothing about polluted river, so in order for some of these things to happen, the river would need to be cleaned up, as so I don't see that on here, so I imagine that would be included in the plan somehow if it's an intelligent plan.
Yes, these were just the top responses. These were just the things that kept coming up over and over again in the survey comments. We actually went through the survey comments to try to develop this. So yes, but put that in, because a lot of people aren't aware of that is a critical step. But yes, we will address that in the plan. Yes. Yes.
There will be a variety of appendices to this plan. There's ongoing Army Corps of Engineers studies. They've, identified different, environmental contaminants and whatever along the river. MIRA, the Mystic River Watershed Association, is doing another study too. So there will be appendices that reference, different environmental legacy issues. So one of the thoughts I had, and maybe you can all help us out, again, I do think it's worth our while trying to talk with each other. If we counted, Michelle and I just now, there's about 70 people in this room. I don't know if it's easy to try to turn a row around with each other and break it down. I just think it would help, trying to get some dialogue around the goals. And so I don't know if row 1 could turn and face row 2, and then 3, if they have room, can face 4. And I mean, we can try to make a little bit more room, but.
All right, who wants to start? One, either you want to talk about a goal, an action step, or something interesting that you talked about. And raise your hand, and Deb will race around with the cordless mic.
This is group 1, let's say. Here was 2. This whole row was 3, and then the back was 4.
Okay, who wants to start? Who would like to start? Just raise your hand.
Okay, we'll start with group 2.
Hi, I love the idea of trying to do park benches and picnic tables and donate them in someone's name. I think that's a great idea. It doesn't really cost the city a lot. They'd have to probably maintain them, but I think that's a great idea. We've had a lot of success with books in memory. Salemwood Library, a lot of the books came from people donating them in someone's name. It's a great way. A lot of places have done it. Hampton Beach has been very successful with having the benches.
Thank you, and it is a great idea. My name is Bob Knox, by the way, DPW Director, and we do have park benches that have been donated in memory of someone, like Councilor DeMaria has a bench for her son on the bike path on Canal Street. Councilor Crowe came before the DPW Commission. There's one at Ferryway Green behind the backstop, a bench in memory of someone. So if you do have somebody, we just approved Jerry Robbins for Kierstead Park, and he's having a memorial bench and sign put up there. So it is a possibility if you have someone that you want to recognize. The DPW will assist with maybe pouring the concrete pad, and you supply the benches. Councilor Bucci, when she was in office, put a bench down at Walden Memorial Delta, which is down in Linden Square. So it does happen. It is something that we openly entertain at the DPW in the city of Malden, and it's a great idea.
Do you have any idea how much a bench costs?
Depends on what kind of. Well, most of the time, what happens is, like, the committee will pay to put it in memory of someone. So if someone passes in your family or something like that. So the one that's down in Walden Memorial Delta was a bench that Councilor Bucci purchased out of her ward money for a former councilor of Linden that was a councilor for 18 years. So they put a bench there. There was a Ward 1 resident that passed away long-term that played baseball at Ferryway Green when it was a Babe Ruth Park. They put the bench in memory of him. So it's money raised by the people that come before the DPW, and we'll assist you with installing and pouring a concrete pad if necessary. But that is something that we entertain, frequently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? No. Lady with the blue.
Hi, thank you. So our group focused mostly on the construct additional page, namely looking at active recreation fields. And one of the things that we were discussing was thinking about the different field uses here that are listed in more of a comprehensive way in terms of like the physical play field. So perhaps it looks like soccer, open play turf area, football, and lacrosse are kind of can coincide in terms of the actual use of what type of field that would be, whereas baseball and softball would be like a separated space. And in addition to that, spray pads, walking trails, these could all be uses that are in, a similarly sized area. I'm speaking from a landscape architecture perspective because we'd like to get a lot of bang for our buck on a site, because that's what I do. But so we talked about that, and just wanted to encourage the thinking that these uses don't have to be like you have one type of field, like one lacrosse field here, and then there's a soccer field. They could all be kind of, maybe that would help with the use issue and how we could have, more active recreation and, get a lot of bang for our buck. So that was one point, and we actually had a second point that Bob is going to speak to.
The other thing that resonated very big here about having big field that could accommodate a lot of different sports was to do it up at the hospital site. 3-1, all the wards and precincts voted 2 years ago. Get some park space up there, and it's a perfect space for what Jessica was talking about. And so consider this end of the room as saying, that's what we need to do, and that needs to be part of the plan.
So that's a potential location. We had that there was a little thing there, suggested location. So that would be a suggested location for additional fields.
we try to take one from Loop 1 first and then come back to this loop?
So I'm just going to go in the order in which we talked about things, which I think kind of has to do with priorities. We started talking about the Malden Riverwalk. As we saw, the slide up there was pretty significant. We started with number 1, which was rezone to require setbacks from the river. So the same way you would require a front yard setback, we are suggesting and we are supporting the fact that there would be a river setback. I know that you probably are familiar with the River's Edge development down in Medford. That's like, I think, the grade A ideal that we can have. And if we were to require that under zoning, if something was to be redeveloped, like say the Super 88 site, they would be required to have a park on the back end rather than just keeping their trash barrels. Number 2, we said, I think we were between providing access and developing walking paths and trails to connect the neighborhoods to the river. And I think that was kind of in line with the first one, but I think the rezoning is number 1. And then we talked about on the bike path, number 1 would be, I believe, lights in order to extend the useful time that you can use that facility. And then we talked about number 2, programs and activities in public art. And we think we connected that with a management plan for the trail. And then we talked about under maintenance and managing of Malden's parks. We said that we're one of the few communities that doesn't have a parks commission or parks department, so we think establishing that would be important. And then number 2 would be developing a system for scheduled maintenance and replacement for park equipment, so you'd know when fields would be reseeded, fertilized, and just repaired over time. And then the additional ones, I know we're a little long. We talked about the gray areas up here on the map. And number 1, we said protect publicly owned undeveloped woodland, which you can see that I circled over there. And then number 2, we said acquire private undeveloped woodland, which is primarily around those gray areas. I think that's one of the things we could use the CPA for. Thank you. Question?
We were looking at the Riverwalk and had some, we liked a lot of those ideas, but we wanted to push them out a little bit further. The develop walking paths trails to connect neighborhoods to the river, we really like that idea, and we also want to look at that for Bike to the Sea as well. We think the Bike to the Sea right now goes right through the middle of the city, and if we can connect the different neighborhoods to the Bike to the Sea, we're basically connecting the whole city. And so we'd like to maybe do that in tandem with the river and the trail. And then also the rezoning, I think that's critical, the overlays, the setbacks, however, we have to figure that out. And then, again, maybe take that a step further for Bike to the Sea and for the trails, so that they can put, as new development comes in, they can put benches down, they can put some lights down, and I'd even like to see the Malden River going up to Oak Grove, even the portion that's underground, some sort of just make the whole city more pedestrian friendly. And then the big deal on our end, soccer fields. So there's that whole Roosevelt Park issue and dealing with that. So if we can figure out how to fix that, it would be a great place, an additional spot for soccer fields. And then what was already said with the hospital site, it's just an obvious choice with all that land. And National Grid, right now we're looking at the Field of Dreams, which serves a recreation portion, since they were offered to provide space for Malden High to play their baseball. That would open up Pine Banks to soccer fields or whatever other sports. And if that doesn't happen there, then if they can appropriate a portion of that to either open space recreation to assist in that portion. And that's good enough for now.
Well, we're kind of reiterating things that other people have said. It was high on our list to establish a parks department and parks division to maintain the parks. But we said it really needs to, or we really need to make a list of capital improvements needed for the parks, so that then we can look at them individually instead of just one at a time. Look at the whole thing and then address them. And a citizen review of where the money from the state grants go. We had someone say that some of the money that we got from state grants, I don't know if it was last year or when it was, actually went to Melrose. So that didn't sound very good at all. When we were talking about construct additional things on the next page, I reiterate what Bob and the back group said is make the Malden Hospital land public. High Rock was evidently purchased from a developer, and so that was private land. There is private land that then can be purchased if Malden Hospital land is considered private land, because there is a developer that has a purchase and sale, although it hasn't gone through. We can do the same thing that has been done with High Rock. The November 2015 results need to be honored. The citizens need to be honored, I think, and they made a request. So I hope we put that in, that request has been already made.
Oh, and on the bike path idea, we liked the community bike store or repair shop idea, and it could be incorporated with the Malden River Park. Like when we eventually clean up the park, then they could kind of both be on the Canal Street area and have sort of a bike path repair shop along with the kayak or rentals and things like that, and it would be a great community space.
If I could just clarify one thing that a few people have mentioned a little earlier. We actually do have a parks department in the city of Malden. It's made up of 6 gentlemen that do parks and forestry work. So all that grass that's out there at the parks is cut by my staff, as well as lining fields. So there is a 6-man parks and forestry department in the city. On the website, look under DPW. Yeah, highway, parks, traffic, water, sewer, all under my, different than the recreation, right. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to share a priority or an action step?
I don't want to give my back to anybody. So I got to take off my glasses to read. We talked a lot about the fields, and we talked a lot about the soccer field challenge. And one idea we came up with is, but I heard I've heard from someone else is a designated soccer complex for Malden youth soccer. Or for Malden, or for anyone playing soccer in Malden. We have, limited on all the fields that we have very limited time on those fields. And we're scattered all over the city. And sometimes we're playing on fields that aren't even dedicated soccer fields. We played on soccer fields that were built over baseball fields, and the players are running on grass, and all of a sudden they're running on the dirt part of a baseball field. So there's challenges with the fields. And so if you had a unified soccer complex, it'd be easier if we were all in one place, and it'd be a lot easier for the organization and coaches to schedule practices and games. Not to mention that, after all the traveling to all the cities that we've traveled to for the Travel League, a lot of the other cities have beautiful soccer complexes. So I think Malden would deserve something like that too. So, and where is another question? Maybe the... Well, so I don't know where, but that was just an idea. And then we also talked about the bike path, and we were very excited about the bike to the sea bike path. And we talked about the need for benches, maybe cameras. I heard through the grapevine, through 2 high schoolers that live at my house, that sometimes there's, fights and rumbles and things on the bike path because it's kind of isolated. So I know the police take good care of, they do patrols down the bike path, but maybe some cameras at key areas that aren't visible to the streets, maybe signage to mile markers, and also restrooms. We were thinking maybe it was for young children, but also some people are on that path, and it's not a circle, so of course, restrooms along the way might be helpful. And then public art was promoted in our group, but maybe public art that could be done in a way like a sculpture, so that kids could climb on it, so it could be a play space as well as art. So and I also mentioned a dog park. We have one, I believe, in Malden, but look around, we're a dog city, you know, and so maybe we could carve out some space for a dog park, maybe along the bike path, maybe somewhere else, but those are some ideas we had.
Reluctant to inform you here. But so we kind of concentrated on ways to better manage and utilize the existing park space, I think, and so people had some great ideas about, some of it is just PR, letting people know what's out there. Some of it is bringing events to the different parks, just sort of an event a week kind of thing, maybe even having a column in a newspaper featuring a park a week, bringing Malden Reads or some other theatrical or artistic event to it. Some of it is just informational, letting people know the fact that the soccer groups have the most permits, and of all the athletic groups, and that was surprising to me. Where can people go to find out what is permitted and how they might actually take get a permit for a birthday party or something like that, and even to plan their own activities. People had a couple of other good ideas, which were, I thought, really novel in terms of creating new space. Could you set up essentially pop-up parks, even in parking lots, the pop-up parking lot park, and people could bring in, one of the things that the survey identified was a desire for amenities, food amenities. Bring in the food trucks, and again, as a way to move people around different. And then the last thing was there was general interest again in the idea for the designated benches and donations and things like that, properly lighted and sort of as a way to put them around the city so that people could. One of the challenges, a couple of people in the group came from different cities before moving to Malden, in places like Somerville and Cambridge. It seems you can't walk more than a block or two without sort of tripping over a park. That's not the case here. Waits Mount, it got good a good attendance and a good audience, and there was good PR around the stargazing in it. But if you weren't drawn to it for that event, people talked about Deborah Park, huge, grand, beautiful park, but it doesn't have the walking track that Pine Banks does, which is a natural attraction for people of all different abilities. So kind of what are the venues to bring people to the parks, and what are the ways that we can help people sort of find their way around the city to the parks that do exist? Anything else that would add? But that was it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to share or want to be fair to everybody? Councilor O'Malley had one more point to make.
And so obviously resources are always limited, and I just wanted to say thank you to Bob Knox and his team at the DPW. They do an amazing job with the resources that they have, and I think he deserves a round of applause.
So again, we have a lot of work to do, the committee, by the end of June, so any feedback, even things subsequent to this, there was that info@maldenredevelopment.com email that you can send comments to, and we'd also ask that if you want to, please leave the sheets that you made notes on tonight. So we really appreciate it. If you haven't signed in, there are sign-in sheets. Those are important because when the plan's done, we'd like to tell people when we're going to have the final plan and try to keep you all in the loop. Okay, thank you. This is the last community forum, but the Open Space Planning Committee meeting has to post their meetings, and the next one I think is in another week, but they're on the City of Malden website. The other quick thing that the mayor's office just reminded me, they've dedicated a whole section on the City of Malden website to the open space plan. The plans are on there, the comments are on there, the survey will be on there in a couple of days. Yeah, cityofmalden.org.